On today's episode, this is actually the final episode of our position breakdowns. On our previous 3 episodes, we've covered quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers, giving our tiers, our flag plants, and fades. It's been a ton of fun. If you haven't had a chance to get caught up on that content, go listen now. Well, go listen after this episode. We want to cover this position. No, actually, no. Go listen before this episode. Come back. Get to this one. This is the least important position. On today's episode, we are talking about tight ends. What's the over-under on how much we're going to make fun of this position today? 6, 7 times? What are we setting it at?
More. The limit does not exist. Yeah. The limit does not exist. It's a pain in the ass position, but as your loyal hosts here, we have to cover it. So we will be going tier by tier, breaking it down.
Tier by tier, we're going to give our flag plants, also our fades. Hard to really fade anyone at tight end, considering anyone can be viable week to week. But we are going to do our best. Before diving in, today's episode of the Regression to the Mean podcast is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Best ball on Underdog Fantasy is the best and easiest way to play fantasy football. Just draft your team and that's it. No waivers, trades, or weekly start-sit decisions. Underdog will automatically play your best players at each position every week. Sign up today with promo code RTM to receive a 100% deposit match up to $100. You can sign up for as little as $10 to start drafting today. Tight ends, a position that in our home league we play in together, is gone. It is no more. We now have 2 flex spots. So that's sharing a little context of where we're at right now with the tight end position. Keegan doesn't even like the GOAT tight end, Travis Kelce. He won't even draft him in the first round, even with positional scarcity. So that tells you a little bit about where we are headed today. And because of that, because of Keegan's overall, I'd say, what would we define it? Skepticism in tight ends. Disdain.
I was going to say disdain. Keegan,
I have passed off the tight end tiers to Keegan Thompson, a tight end denier, a tight end dunker, a tight end hater. Yeah, you're a tight end denier. So Keegan actually has his custom tiers. He is going to go through them, and then we're going to give our thought process on it. It's nice to see somebody else putting their neck on the line after the wide receiver episode. After I put Amon-Ra St. Brown in tier 2, I was getting some weird looks from 2 of my co-hosts here. But Keegan Thompson, why don't you start things off here today, giving us your first 3 tiers of the tight end position?
I have my first 3 tiers of the tight end here, actually. And it starts with the Kelce tier, who is in his own tier. I don't think there's much to say about it. Like Travis Kelce's Travis Kelce. He will continue to be in his own tier until something happens or aliens actually do invade this earth. The next tier after him is also a singular player. It's the Mark Andrews tier. This is the guy that I think always has potential to catch Kelce or surpass Kelce as the tight end 1 in fantasy, no matter what scoring format you're in. So I think he belongs in his own tier as well, too. And then for tier 3 here, I've got the junior varsity tier, the I'm up next tier, the guys who could overtake the 2 above them if something were to happen to Kelce, or if Mark Andrews, something happens to him, or just something catastrophic goes wrong in the NFL. I like this bottom tier here as players that are still safe bets to help you get into positional advantage. But I think truly outside of Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce, there is not much that can be said for players that are better than them or give you the advantage that they do. So after these 3 tiers, any arguments against how I have these positioned or placed, or is there some kind of argument that you guys can make for Mark, Hawk, and Goddard to be kind of together there?
I think the main thing I would say, I think Kelce for sure belongs by himself. I think Andrews belongs by himself too. The only thing I would say is Kittle could maybe fit in the JV tier. He's consistently finishes tight end 3 and 4. I think you could make an argument that he would belong there with Hawk and Dallas. I'm fine with him where he is, but I think out of kind of what stands out to me at first would be moving Greg up there.
When I'm looking at this, Keegan, I think you've nailed it. I think these are the 3 tiers. I think lumping Mark Andrews in the JV tier doesn't seem right, in my opinion, because Mark Andrews right now as it stands is still the top target earner in his offense. Now, Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman may ascend, and he may be the 1A, 1B in his offense, which could change things considerably. But those 2 guys right there, I think, are probably one of 3 or 4 tight ends on this entire board that can make the argument that they will lead the team in targets. So I think that's fair the way you have it broken down. I think normally I'd see George Kittle in that JV tier, but there are 4 mouths to feed in that offense. Last year, he ran super hot with touchdowns with Brock Purdy, and he was able to hit home. But I just don't see that week-in-week volume to put him in like the top 3 tiers, even though he's like the second best tight end in the league in terms of talent. There's no denying that as a football player. But just in terms of fantasy production, I think it's fair to have Kittle in the boom bust tier, which looks like that's tier 4.
So, just moving on to the next 2 tiers after that. Tier 4 and tier 5. I do have Kittle in this next tier because I labeled it as, this could be tight end 1 this year, but he could also cost you a fantasy season because of where you're betting on these guys and where they're being drafted. So I've got Pitts, Waller, and George Kittle in this tier. The reason I say that is because you still have to spend pretty good capital. You still have to spend a 6th or a late 5th on Kittle or Pitts, and then like a 7th on Waller, right? So it's still pretty significant draft capital to spend on these guys who have shown flashes of tight end 1 potential, but also have missed time, been injured, been inconsistent, operate in an offense like Kittle does, where he is the 4th option sometimes on any given week with the lowest target share. Darren Waller now has a new offensive environment where he probably will be the focal point of the offense and the highest receiving option. So I have him in this tier just because of last year being so weird. I think he could easily be in the junior varsity tier, just projecting what his like target volume is. And Pitts is Pitts, like the unicorn of unicorns that we'll continue to buy into because of his magical upside. And then the tier after that, I have kind of like
he's cryptocurrency. We just keep buying. We're just waiting for it to pop. Just buy the dip.
Yeah,
keep buying.
Exactly. And then, so I have your next one, your safe bets with like level floors. This is your take home to mom tier list. Like guys you can just draft and not really worry about, but nothing too exciting and nothing too dangerous. And that's Evan Engram, Pat Freiermuth, and David Njoku. So Aidan, any arguments for or against your guy Pitts to be in or out of this tier?
Oh man, Kyle Pitts has hurt me. It's a love-hate relationship. It's mostly hate. But but the sky is the limit with this guy. Like if he could get some decent quarterback play, like he could easily end up as tight end 2 or 3 on the season. So he belongs in that tier, just given like I think what he's accomplished thus far. Or I guess you could almost say like lack of accomplishment so far. So like I'm fine with Kyle Pitts there. I think these 2 tiers make a ton of sense. That tier 4 one is a little stinky. We might have a fade or 2 from that tier. It's just like
tier 5.
When I look at that tier, it's like
the Muth tier.
Yeah, tier 4
yes.
there. It's
5.
Yeah, it's just 5. Sorry, it's it's just guys like I'm just not that inspired to draft a tight end at that point in the draft, but like those guys I think do fit together given their kind of like floors and ceilings as a group there. So no, I think you're crushing it, Keegan. I really like your graphic too. This is A1 stuff.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I think so first and foremost, yes, give me tier 4 over tier 5 any day of the week, even though I really like Njoku and Freiermuth and Evan Engram as individual like football players. When you're trying to win in fantasy football, the difference between the tight end 4 in like TJ Hawkinson or Dallas Goedert is pretty marginal in like the tight end 10, which will probably be Njoku. It's Kittle, Waller, and Pitts all offer league-winning upside because Pitts and Waller can make legitimate claims that they will be the top target earners in their offense. And then George Kittle, if there's an injury and it becomes the Kittle offense again, will absolutely rampage down people's faces. It'll be sensational, right, if that were to happen. So I think overall, that 4th tier, that boom or bust tier, if you want a tight end, go draft a tight end that actually could give you a positional advantage, that actually could stack up against Travis Kelce, right? I think that's more key than trying to play it safe with an Engram, a Freiermuth, or an Njoku, who are going to be the 3rd or 4th options in maybe lower pass volume offenses or offenses with question marks. So I think at the end of this year, if like Pitts hits home, Pitts could be in that tier with Mark Andrews. So could Darren Waller as the top target earners in their respective offenses, but just a lot of question marks with them. So luckily this year, it's the cheapest you've been able to get Waller, Kittle, and Pitts. So your opportunity cost isn't as disastrous as it was when you were drafting Kyle Pitts in the 3rd round last year. So it's nice opportunity cost. So yeah, I think you nailed it. I have no notes on that one.
And then so after those 2 tiers, we've got which I think is one of my favorites, is the mystery box tier. It could even be the tier 4 tier, basically. And that is Greg Dulcich, Chig Okonkwo, and then the 3 rookies round out this. So that's Michael Mayer, Laporta, and Dalton Kincaid. I think traditionally I would not bet on a rookie tight end to have any relevance to fantasy, but I think they all are in very unique environments, whereas Dalton Kincaid was drafted to be a playmaker for the Bills. Like, they do have a blocking tight end already who will help more on run plays. And Sam Laporta is replacing a massive workload in TJ Hawkinson. And I actually didn't even have Michael Mayer in this tier. I didn't really have him in a tier before we got to this episode today, and I realized he needed to go somewhere. And I think it's fitting for him because we're not really talking about him enough, I think, compared to the other rookies. And he was an outstanding pass catcher in college. And, looking at some tight end stats today, just from college production in general, I thought he really stood out. And just as a name, it's like, okay, this guy is very productive. So I think there's some mystery and allure to him. And then the other 2 guys, Dulcich and Chig Okonkwo, are great athletes, tremendous upside, who have shown blips of, fantasy relevancy at the tight end position. And they're like bets that I'm willing to take. And then the next tier after that is just I've streamed this guy before tier. These are the guys that you take towards the end of your drafts that will go in and out of people's lineups. These are the sisterhood of the traveling tight ends, basically. So Dalton Schultz, Tyler Higbee, Gerald Everett, Dawson Knox, Irv Smith, Hayden Hurst, Cole Kmet, Pull the Lever Conk, Hunter Henry, Juwan Johnson, Taysom Hill, Zach Ertz, and players of that nature. I didn't have faces for all of them in this tier list. So I didn't have time to get all those in there, but you know what that tier is, and you know what that brings to you every week. But what do you guys feel about our boy Greggy Dulcich and the mystery box tier?
Just kind of talking about tier 6 in general, I think you kind of nailed it. This is by far my favorite tier. I'd either spend big at the top 2-3 tiers potentially, or I'm probably waiting to the mystery box tier. My 2 highest exposures for tight ends both reside in the mystery box tier, so it's I'm pretty high on this tier, and especially Greg Dulcich, who we're all a fan of.
We'll talk more about Dulcich later. I think tier 4 is interesting because if things break right for Greg Dulcich, Sam Laporta, Dalton Kincaid, probably not Michael Mayer, but those 3 could be the number 2 target earners in their offense this season. Now, historically, betting on a rookie tight end is ass. That's probably the word I would say. Is just
correct.
Remember, Kyle Pitts' record-breaking season at tight end as a rookie was tight end 6th finish, right? He hit 1,000 yards and 2 touchdowns. I don't get why he can't score touchdowns. But just remembering here, we want tight ends that can score touchdowns, be on the field, participate in the offense. But it's really hard for rookies basically to learn 2 positions at once, which is blocking and receiving. If they're really serious about Dalton Kincaid primarily playing as a slot wide receiver, it's going to be really hard.
He's not going to block much.
If that's the case and he's running a ton of routes with Josh Allen, I mean, Dalton Kincaid is someone who could probably win you a fantasy league because you're going to get him so late. But banking on that historically has not worked well for fantasy managers. So if he's an 11th, 12th round pick and you throw a dart on him, it's a great pick. But if he gets steamed up into the 7th, 8th round where you're taking him in the Pitts range, Waller range, I'd be very cautious with Darren Waller. But somebody in this tier, I've streamed this guy before tier, that I don't think actually belongs there is Tyler Higbee. I think on talent, because he moves he has rigor mortis, I think on talent-wise he probably deserves to be there. But the guy had a 22% target share last year. He's the number 2 option in an offense that might be throwing the piss out of the ball because their defense is so bad. And I think you could easily put him in the tier with Evan Engram and Freiermuth because he's just going to see a ton of targets. And again, I don't think he's the most talented player, but just volume and opportunity at the tight end position is half the battle. And if he catches 4 or 5 touchdowns, he's going to have a top 8 finish at tight end.
I think it's a great argument for Higbee, and I actually did think about putting him in this tier because of everything that you just said, but it's Van Jefferson is probably 3rd option there, right? It's Cooper Kupp, then it's Higbee, then it's someone like Van Jefferson.
Puka.
So targets are aplenty.
Puka Nacua.
Sure. We could do that, but I do think you're right, Shaun. Like he might have a much safer floor than the rest of these. I've streamed these guys before tier. I'm just like I think I cautiously put him in the bottom because Tyler Higbee is more of a guy that I'll take in best ball and not for redraft. And I was thinking kind of like redraft brain for these rankings when I'm going through them. Because sure, I honestly don't want to draft anybody in this safe bets floor. Just the way I approach tight ends if I don't have to. So, but I think he belongs in here, Shaun. So I'm actually going to move him up and leave him here. But I feel like the rest of these guys, your Schultz, your Everetts, your Dawson Knox, Irv Smith, Cole Kmet, like maybe people you take like dart throws on and best ball, but like for redraft when you need like constant point production on a per week basis, these guys are only going to average like 6-7 points a game, maybe 8 if you're lucky. And it's not going to make a difference on your roster.
Yeah, it isn't. Upside wins championships. Shout out Scott Barrett at Fantasy Points. Pick the guys that you think later on that can give you an edge to win. That's why somebody like Dalton Kincaid is very interesting. And I can leave it at that. Wow.
But yeah, those are my tiers, Shaun and Aidan. Thanks for letting me take a hold of that this time. Felt good to put that together.
You crushed it.
That was nice.
You crushed it. And there were visual aids. Our YouTube our YouTube audience has been begging for visual aids, and it was just so simple and easy.
I know.
What a creative outside of the box move. We might be moving Keegan up to creative director of the podcast. What an absolute home run there. A screen share. Who would have ever thought?
I was looking at Michael Mayer's face because he wasn't on our doc, and I was like, "Who is this?" I was like, "I just don't know what he looks like."
Why was it a headshot? No, that's what he
right?
looks like. Why does it look like he was like auditioning for Oppenheimer? He looked so serious.
Yeah, no,
he's a
he
handsome fella, dude. Adjust your rankings.
Chisel.
He looked like Thad Castle kind of in the photo. I was like, "Who is this guy?"
Do we move him?
I want to show
ranks?
you guys something before we move on. Yeah, okay, we're gonna move him up the ranks after we take a look at his. This is his high school shot. What? Look at this. Adjust your ranks.
Oh yeah,
as a guy who's going to score 7 touchdowns a year in the leagues.
He looks like he was like on a CW show about football, high school football. Like
I was literally about to say he could have been in the Friday Night Lights TV show, bro.
Yes.
His character is like he's like the douchey guy no one likes, but towards the end of the season he learns how to play as a team player.
He's just misunderstood. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Misunderstood. His dad's been like way too hard on him about football ever since he was 3.
Oh, geez.
Oh my gosh.
Well, that is the tight end position in terms of tiers. Flag plants is, I think, a little bit easier for this position. Fades is tough. I don't know if we have an alert or a graphic or a bell. I don't know, but this is our first ever group flag plant. We have a trio flag plant that we're putting in the ground before we dive into our individual ones. And if you have been following this podcast all off season, it is none other than Greg Dulcich, our group flag plant.
Yes. Say his name.
Greg Dulcich, the man with the curly locks and the mustache, a man that Keegan Thompson aspires to be. Greg Dulcich led.
One day I'll be him.
Yes. Greg Dulcich led all rookie tight ends in yards, air yards, snaps per game. He was explosive. He was on the field, which is hard to do for rookies, and he was productive, right? This is something that rookie tight ends very rarely accomplish. And why does that matter? Is because the year 1 to year 2 leap for tight ends is usually pretty dramatic. From Ryan Heath over at Fantasy Points, this is what he has to say about year 2 tight end breakouts. The sophomore tight end breakout is among the most powerful and reliable laws of fantasy. You pair that with his rookie production, the expected jump in year 2, and head coach Sean Payton already poetically waxing, comparing him to Jeremy Shockey, Jason Witten, Jimmy Graham, calling him the Joker of the offense, which is a role that he has previously given to Reggie Bush and Alvin Kamara. I did not have that on your bingo cards. Again, you could get this guy in the 12th or 13th round. He is one of our most overexposed drafted players in all of best ball. Greg Dulcich, first ever group flag plant. So naturally, he will be the Albert O of this season. Watch, because we've all decided.
That'd be a bummer. Don't wish that on him.
Okay, so that is our group flag plant. We're going to transition over to our individual guys that we are drafting no matter what. Keegan, kick us off here. This is a kind of deep cut tight end. Not many people know about him. Tell us a little bit about your diamond in the rough here that you're drafting.
He's low key.
Yeah, here's why you should spend third round draft capital on an unknown guy that you've probably never heard of. But the name is Mark Andrews.
Whoa!
And
there it is.
You went to Oklahoma, right?
I think this year I'm going to approach tight end a little differently and just try and get an advantage if it's there to me. Like if I like my first 2 picks, I'm just going to swing for the fences with Mark Andrews because he has, by my tiers, you see, in his own tier, and he has the, I think, best chance to surpass Kelsey. He's essentially Kelsey environment. And that would be different this year because they have a better receiving core, but he's still the primary best receiver in the Ravens offense. He's Lamar Jackson's favorite weapon, most reliable weapon. He's also 6 years younger than Kelsey. He's got great juice. He's an athletic pass catcher, great after the catch as well, too. But, over the last 2 seasons, he ranks second in targets, 8.1 a game. Receptions, 5.6. Receiving yards, 69.0. Nice. And receiving PPR points per game among tight ends, which is 15.15. So he's right there knocking on Kelsey's door statistically. The knock on him is that he just doesn't run enough routes compared to Kelsey. And I definitely understand that. But with all the offseason changes, you guys have heard me. And if you've listened to the pod, you've also heard me plant my flag with Lamar and just the Ravens offense in general. And the upgrade that I think they'll have in overall pace and just pass catcher usage with the Monken offensive scheme. I think it bodes well for Mark Andrews especially too. So Monken historically wasn't using his tight ends a lot in the NFL when he was coaching, but he also did not have a tight end like Mark Andrews. So I went back and looked at Georgia's tight end usage last year to see how Brock Bowers was used. And that guy was used a ton. And also, this is a future first round tight end talent. He is a really good player.
He's a guy. What you're saying is Brock Bowers is a guy.
Dude. Certified.
Yeah, he's dude.
Certified dude.
Here's a guy.
If you take the regular plus postseason of college last year, he was 4th in targets with 82, 3rd in receptions with 63, 1st in yards, 942 yards. He's also 1st in yards per reception with 15 amongst tight ends with at least 15 targets. He ran a route on 91% of his team snaps, 3rd in yards per route run, 5th in average depth of target, and 3rd in PFF receiving grade. And the only people above him are Kincaid and Michael Mayer, 2 basically first-round tight end talents.
Studs.
So, yeah, absolute studs, finished above Brock Bowers. So if I'm using that as a reference for how Monken will plan to use an elite tight end like this, then I think it bodes well for Andrews for sure. He's also only 2 years removed from being the tight end 1 overall. And since 2019, he's never finished worse than tight end 5 in standard scoring or worse than tight end 6 in PPR scoring. And last year, in the first 6 weeks of the season, he had 2 tight end 1 finishes, a tight end 2 finish, not just tight end 2, bottom half 12. The second best tight end of the week and 2 of the first best tight end finishes, and also a tight end 3 finish on the week. So history's there, talent's there, production's there. I'm betting on him, and instead of spending a first round pick on Kelsey, maybe I'll go wide receiver, hero running back or something, and then scoop at Andrews. I think that's a perfect way to start your drafts this year.
Super talented route runner. I love watching him in space, beat linebackers, beat safeties. Mark Andrews is a certified baller, certified, an exceptional receiver, really good blocker, just a great player. I mean, again, it's just your preference. If you want to pay up at the beginning of the draft, 3rd round. Don't worry about tight end. You won't have to worry about streaming. And you're probably going to have the number 1 option in an offense that a lot of smart people are saying is going to be a top 5 offense in the league. I just worry about increased competition, but Mark Andrews is an alpha, and he should win out. So I'm happy that you're spreading the gospel of Mark Andrews because it was a weird day on Twitter. That was a weird day on Twitter when people were trying to shit on Mark Andrews, saying he wasn't going to be out there running routes. I was like, guys, you're overthinking this. And offensive coordinators
not watched him the last few
call
years.
Plays for their best players, unless they're Freddie Kitchens. So I'm in on Mark Andrews.
Yeah, that's an easy sell there. Easy sell. It's really just about, are you okay with kind of paying that price? It's do you want your tight end there, or do you want to stack up your other flex positions? It's it's really all about draft strategy, but you for sure have a leg up at that position if you have him there.
I'm moved.
You're moved. You're moved by yourself.
That was
He's
nice.
moved by himself.
That was nice.
I brought myself to tears. Aidan, tell us a little bit else. Aidan, tell us a bit about who you are targeting in drafting, no matter what, at the tight end position.
Yeah, so this is a guy that actually we've been talking about quite a bit lately. I've kind of mentioned like the tight end like 6 to 12 range isn't typically where I like to pick my tight end, but if I was to take any of them in that range, it's Darren Waller for me. I just think he has by far the most amount of upside and has already proven he has top 3, top 4 tight end capability in him. Outside of Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews, there's not another tight end in football that has the potential to lead his team in targets. He should easily see 100 plus targets. He's already done it in his career. He's seen 117 back in 2019 and 145 back in 2020. So like we've seen this volume before. Like it's not like this is some pipe dream. Like we've watched it unfold in front of our very eyes on Sundays. So I think that's super feasible. If you look at their target leaders last year, not a lot of targets left the offense, but it's just like there's no real certified alpha in that offense. You had Saquon leading the offense with 76 targets. Slayton had 71 and Richie James had 70. So it's like there's no one here really commanding, the majority of Daniel Jones' attention, which is awesome for him. You've been watching him in training camp. I know we've been watching the clips of him. It's like he is just, it feels like the varsity guy playing against like JV players, like trying to line up with some of those DBs. And it's like, this guy is going to be a fucking problem if he stays healthy this year. So he's priced at, where am I here? Tight end 6.
7.
Tight end 6. So we're probably catching him around pick 70 or so, which at that point, like I'm okay with that price. You've already built out most of your starting positions on your roster. If you're okay with your tight end there, like I like his price point a lot. I could see him kind of rising throughout the offseason too, just given like how much positive buzz is coming around him. Like I feel like people kind of forgot about Darren Waller in terms of like what he's capable of as a pass catcher. So I love Darren Waller. It just feels like as Daniel Jones continues to get better as a passer too, like this is only going to help him having this big bodied target both in the red zone and just up and down the field. So I love Darren Waller. I just think there's such a high potential outcome for him in terms of where he could finish. Like tight end 1, I don't know, but if he finishes tight end 3, like super reasonable. I think all the things are there in front of him for this to be possible.
Remember that game, that Monday night game, first ever in Las Vegas, where the Raiders won that crazy like walk-off touchdown to Zay Jones? Do you remember Darren Waller had like 20 targets in that game? Like he legitimately,
it was awesome.
He had like 200 receiving yards. And it's not like, if you look at his efficiency metrics, he's still the same guy. Like when he's on the field, he's good. It's just been a health thing for him. And we need him to stay
1000%.
healthy. But if he puts together a healthy season with Daniel Jones ascending, with Brian Dable behind the, control in the car, so to speak, in terms of the play calling, we might see a pass-happier offense in New York, and he projects to be the alpha of that offense. Again, you're not usually able to get a tight end that late, but why are you able to get that late? He's played 12 games, 16 games total combined over the past 2 years, so you have to factor that in. So it's high risk, high reward, but I think it's worth the swing.
Yeah, I had him in that tier of, can be tight end 1, but also could cost you a season for that exact reason where it's like, sure, he hasn't been exactly healthy, but I'm kind of like, and I have the same thought process about Brandon Cooks as well this year, but it's like he was a quiet quitter last year for the Raiders. Like I really don't think he was like banged up. Like he just quiet quit on his team, just like Brandon Cooks did, like with the Texans. So I'm not going to try and knock him for that, but I couldn't put him up any higher because of the season prior as well too. But when that guy's healthy and he's running, he's as good as they come at the position. So I actually really like Waller a lot this year as well too.
So when I was taking a look at my flag plant, I didn't really know who I was going to go with. So I dove into the Fantasy Points data suite. Shout out Fantasy Points, Scott Barrett. Second mention for Scott. Friend of the pod? We don't know. Maybe someday.
Maybe.
I'm looking at tight end stats, and really what I want to see with tight ends is I want to see them be a top 3 option in their offense. I want to see the fact that they're on the field running routes. and I want them to be efficient. Like when they get the ball in their hands, they breaking tackles, gaining yards. They don't have to be like prime George Kittle in that regard, but I want them to be a good offensive player. Like, again, we mentioned Tyler Higbee. Tyler Higbee is catching the ball for a 6-yard gain and falling down. That's a great player. Like, he's going to get fed targets. He may get you your 4 for 40, but I want somebody that has that upside that is super efficient. So stats that I'm looking at are like routes run per team drop back, team target share, yards per route run, yards per target, yards after contact per reception, right? Efficiency, involvement stats. I also want my tight end to play in a really good offense. So when we're looking at a tight end who plays in a great offense with a good quarterback, is on the field running a ton of routes, is hyper efficient, and is a top 3 option on his team, I circled on Dallas Goedert. And I think Dallas Goedert checks all of those boxes, and for that reason, he is my tight end flag plant for 2023. So among tight ends who had 25 targets, which is pretty generous. 25 targets is a lot of player. You welcome in a lot of statistical noise when you do 25 targets, right? He was 4th in routes run per team dropback. He was 6th in team target share. He was 2nd in yards per route run. He was 1st in yards per target, and he was 1st in yards after contact per reception. His floor is relatively safe. He had 7 top 10 finishes in 12 games. And he has yet to have a big touchdown season. This guy only scores like 3 touchdowns every year. He hasn't walked into like a 7 or 8 touchdown season. Now, I understand Jalen Hurts dominates that part of the field, and I get that as a rusher, it's a lot easier for Hurts just to run it in and throw it. But again, if Dallas Goedert were to walk into some positive TD regression and score 7 or 8 touchdowns, he would have a top 3 season, in my opinion. And I don't think his draft position factors in his ceiling, because if something were to happen to A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith, I think Dallas Goedert as the number 2 option in this offense would go absolutely nuclear. So all of that makes a really strong case of really strong ceiling and floor. He's, I think, most people's tight end 4, tight end 5. If you love George Kittle, you're going to really like Dallas Goedert because he's basically a very similar player. He's like George Kittle light. He's Kirkland George Kittle, right? What do you guys think about Dallas Goedert? I'm curious.
I think it's amazing that he finished as high as he did, while also just on a total points, like he ended up with 141 fantasy points, good for tight end 12 in PPR and tight end 10 in standard, and he missed weeks 11 through 15. And that's
a
with
testament to the tight end position.
He doesn't score touchdowns.
It is.
He doesn't score touchdowns.
Exactly. But I mean, you're looking at these games, you're like Shaun's right on efficiency. 3 receptions, 60 yards. 5 receptions, 82 yards. 5 receptions, 72 yards. 8 receptions, 95 yards. Like, he had a 100-yard game. Like, this is a guy who gets the ball and does something well with it too. It benefits from a very good quarterback, like a strong ADOT, like a strong just overall offense too. And if Devonta Smith or AJ Brown, like you said, misses time, holy moly. And I'm in on the Eagles offense to regress positively based off their 4th quarter usage numbers.
Yes.
They never played from behind. They don't pass the ball. We've covered Jalen Hurts' passing stats in the 4th quarter alone. They're going to be in more competitive games. And to me, that just means better options for Dallas Goedert, more opportunities for AJ Brown, more opportunities for Devonta Smith. They're going to have so much more to work with, just from fantasy usage, because they didn't get used in the 4th quarter. They didn't need to.
Aiden, are you buying Goddard?
Yeah, I think he gets kind of lost in the mix when you're talking about the top tight ends in the game. You want tight ends that are going to be in high scoring offenses, that are going to be in the red zone often, where he's going to be getting cracks at tutties. So this is a guy that I like a lot. How much I'll be buying, I'm not sure. Again, just given it's just not a range that I love. But I love Dallas Goedert overall as a player. I've got a ton of him in best ball.
Yeah, Goddard is, I think, a 5th round ADP, 4th, 5th round right now. So yeah. This is a spot where we like to take quarterbacks, but it could be a situation where you take Hurts in the 3rd and you get greedy for a little Goddard stack, because that's a fun one to put together on a team.
That's a good one.
I'm a fan of Goddard, and they use him in the screen game too. So anyone that's getting designed passes, where they're the first option, is a talented player, especially in a talented offense. So I'm going with Dallas Goedert there. Transitioning over to our fades. Keegan, tell us somebody you're just really not interested in drafting this year at the tight end position.
Unfortunately, this is a guy who actually helped me out a lot last year in a late season trade that helped even out my tight end position.
Fuck
this
you.
guy.
I can't believe I lost.
And helped me beat Shaun.
I lost
actually,
to both of these fuckers in the semis. Oh my god, never.
This is a guy who actually also falls under my kind of like safe 4 bet tight end tier, but it's none other than Pat Freiermuth. By this point, I'm sure you guys are very aware that I am starting a do not draft list, and it starts with basically all Pittsburgh Steelers players at this point. I think there's just a lot to dislike about their options, but nothing against Pat Freiermuth, but he's just a guy that I think offers minimal upside for the position. He's not a player who can leap, I think, into tight end 1, tight end 2, tight end 3 territory. I think he's probably firmly cemented as a tight end 10 through like tight end 7 option. And like Shaun said, like the difference between tight end 6 and tight end 12 is like there is no difference, right? So he only had 2 touchdowns in 2022, which is not enough to like propel me or compel me to draft a tight end like that. Never scored more than 15 points in PPR through 17 weeks. So he's not a spike week guy. Like he's not somebody who's going to win me a matchup. And out of 17 games, he only eclipsed 80% of the team snaps 3 times. Like somebody like Mark Andrews and George Kittle, like the reason they are so good is because they're on the field for 90+% of a team's snaps and are featured in those offenses. And that's why you like guys like that. He's only 10th in yards per route run. I don't expect that to change much with Kenny Pickett's style of offense that they unfortunately have to run under Matt Canada. 14th in total routes run percentage, 68.2%. And, you know, that's in a year where Pickens is a rookie. Deontay Johnson's on the field a lot. Like Pickens will now get better. There will also be Allen Robinson in the fold. You have Darnell Washington. I'm not sure how much he will run routes for them this year, but, you know, there is a case to be made that there is less routes available for Pat Freiermuth for him to be effective on as well too. And, you know, 16th in average depth of target at only 8.3 yards. Like he is a very consistent, boring tight end that doesn't offer me a positional advantage at tight end. He doesn't offer me like league winning upside. He's just boring. I don't think it's anything against him. I think he's actually a very, very good tight end. He's tied to one of the most boring offenses, like a high school offense that Matt Canada unfortunately runs for one of the youngest. It's like one of the youngest groups of offensive talents.
So many curl routes.
It's ridiculous. Because like you could make a case that the Pittsburgh Steelers have a young and exciting offensive core.
They do.
Some, you
it's
know,
a good core.
They do.
They have a really good core.
And they just have a terrible coaching plan to go with it. So that's kind of part of what goes into me not wanting any of Pat Freiermuth. You know, it's not a guy that moves it for me.
It's like did you like Dallas Goedert? Because you could get him in the 10th round, but the only catch is he won't break as many tackles and the offense is way worse. Like that's Freiermuth.
And it's not like his ADP is crazy. I mean, he's being drafted as like the 92nd overall player in Sleeper, and he's the tight end 9 in half PPR. But I just don't want that. Like
that pick should be someone you're trying to win your league with. The 9th round, you should be taking a massive swing. Somebody who could help you in your league. Freiermuth is
that's so boring to take in the 9th round.
Boring. It's like you're just gonna get 5 to 10 points every week. Like you're not winning a league with that. It's like
he's good though.
It's just kind of slotted in there. Like he's a good football player for sure, but it's just like it's not a needle mover. It's just
give me Dalton Kincaid at like pick 120 or 121 instead. You know, give me 2 or 3 extra rounds of players to build out my team.
For sure.
And give me Kincaid, Laporta, Michael Mayer. Like I'd rather just do that. And that's why
his ADP is way too high. His ADP is way
how
too
many
high.
points per game difference is there going to be between Freiermuth and Gerald Everett? Like straight up. They offer like they're both
less than
like
1.5. I'd be willing to.
It's
I was
like
going
the
to say 2, maybe
same
3.
player. Like no disrespect, like they're both talented guys. But they're very similar. It's just the state of
Everett's on a better offense too.
Yeah,
you know that's actually a great comparison.
What's like the major difference?
But yeah.
I mean that's really what
I'm
looking
out.
at. Aidan,
For that reason, Sharks, I'm out.
Aidan, who are
exactly
who are you fading at the position?
So I've got another guy from that tier as well. I know I teased it earlier because it's just not a tier that I'm very interested in. And for me, it's David Njoku. I feel like people forget like how long David Njoku's been in the league now, and it just feels like we're like still waiting on this pop. He's entering year 7 already. This young player, like we've been waiting on David Njoku to break out. Like no, like he's not breaking out. Like he just is what he is. He finished last year as tight end 13, and I think that's about as good as it's gonna get. In 2018, he was tight end 8. 2018. So like this was a long time ago. It just feels like there's just not a very high ceiling for him. When you look at statistically with Deshaun Watson, he's never really produced high scoring tight ends for fantasy football. The most a tight end has ever caught under him was back in his Houston days, was just over 400 yards. Granted, Jordan Akins is not the same athlete.
He's now on the Browns. Akins is, and he is an athlete.
I know.
Njoku's
I know.
hell of an athlete, but so was Akins.
Akins is fine, but it's just like he's being drafted as tight end 10 right now, and it's just kind of going back to this argument that like we're gonna beat into the ground. It's like I'd rather just keep drafting running backs and wide receivers. Like I'd rather wait a couple rounds and take Dulcich or Tyler Higbee. It's just like there's no reason to be taking this type of guy when I think last year is probably his ceiling this year, and he's being drafted higher than that this year. It's just, I don't know. We all think the Browns offense is going to be better, which I think it will be, but there's just not a lot of past evidence and kind of things to sway me to believe that he's even going to match his ADP, let alone exceed it. So for that reason, that's a pretty hard do not draft for me. It's just, again, it's not a needle mover. I feel like I know generally what the outcome's going to be, and it's just like I'm not winning leagues with David Njoku.
He can have spike weeks at least. The athleticism is enticing, but you're right. He's the third option in offense. It's a complete.
Yeah.
He's nice. I guess if you want to bet on the Browns offense, he's a nice little throw. I don't know if I'm fading Njoku, but he's my favorite out of that tier. How about I'll leave it at that? He's my favorite out of that tier.
Here's the thing.
Same. Actually.
Aidan,
that's a nice way to put it.
Aidan's fade for David Njoku. I mean, he averaged 8.1 fantasy points a game. Freiermuth averaged 7.3.
Yeah,
Cole Kmet averaged 7.2. You know, Juwan Johnson averaged 7.1. Dulcich averaged 7 points a game last year on like minimal usage compared to that.
Just wait a couple rounds. There's going to be league winners around like this part of the draft. Like, don't burn it on a tight end who's going to score you 7 points a game. It's just like there's better moves to be made, man. Swing for the fences. Go win your leagues.
Shaun,
take us home, Shaun.
If I'm reading this correct, we're going to cover this entire tier of our safe bets.
We faded.
I know. We
faded this entire tier. That blew my mind when I realized that we had all three guys from the same tier. So I am fading Evan Engram. He's actually somebody that I've taken in best ball occasionally when I'm looking to complete the Jag stack. Best ball is a lot different than redraft. Evan Engram had an awesome season in 2023. Right, he was fantastic. He got home on some massive performances during the fantasy playoffs. Right, 3 to 4 weeks where he had like multiple 30 bombs. He was outscoring Travis Kelce, which is incredible. First round talent that I think we've all liked, and it was really refreshing to see him get used in a creative way by Doug Peterson. And he just got an extension by the Jaguars, so he's going to be tied to Trevor Lawrence for the foreseeable future. However, he's the third or fourth option on any given week in this offense now, and Calvin Ridley is this new alpha, and we have no idea how the targets are going to be distributed amongst the wide receivers. Like Zay Jones was really freaking good, and we don't know how many balls he's going to get, how many often he's going to get targeted. So how do we know how many targets Evan Ingram's going to get, right? And they also are touting that Travis Etienne will be better as a wide receiver, and from what I understand, Tank Bigsby's been excellent as a pass catcher out of the backfield, and that could even take away more targets and more opportunities from really everyone in this offense. So it's kind of the George Kittle conundrum where it's a lot of mouths to feed, right? And I think obviously he's going to hit home with some major performances. You know, I wouldn't be shocked if he had multiple tight end one finishes just because of how good this offense is going to be and how much we believe in Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson and how talented he is as a player. But good luck guessing when he's going to go off. He's going to need to see an injury or a major uptick in volume where it's like the Jaguars are passing a lot because their defense is bad for him to hit home. And what was he, tight end 3 last year? Tight end 4 on a cumulative basis. I think on PPG basis he was tight end 6. That kind of felt like his ceiling last year. And
for sure.
I don't know. I'd rather like take a swing on Kincaid or Dulcich than take Evan Engram. Again, in best ball, fine target, especially if you're trying to get a stack with the Jaguars, but I'm pretty good getting a naked Evan Engram in my lineup. I'm good.
Interesting stat that I was just fantasy point status tweet. I love this tool. I'm so glad that this is a thing. But
Patting your back,
Evan Engram.
So thanks, Keegan,
not patting my back.
for pushing for us, Keegan. You're welcome, Keegan.
No, not patting my back, patting Scott's back. But Evan Engram was second amongst tight ends with designed plays.
Yes.
Like for design reads. Kelsey is obviously up there too. Dallas Goedert is third. Kelsey's fourth. But like, I don't know. It's not too sticky of a stat, right? But like 15% of his targets like came from designed plays.
A lot of mesh. They would run mesh concepts
and things like that.
They'd run mesh concepts and crossers where they'd like get their receivers vertical and they would just run Evan Engram across the line of scrimmage and he would just pick up 30 yards and just an easy chunk gain. So he's a tight end who's talented and his coach knows how to use him. So that alone puts him in a good conversation, but there just could be some weeks where he sees 2 targets. Like it could be rough.
To your argument, Shaun, like some of the guys that we've talked about and we flag planted on their first read, so percentage of teams' first read targets, Mark Andrews leading the way with 31% of his team's first lead. That will change because he's got more weapons. Kyle Pitts, 28%, Kelsey, 27%, Dallas Goedert, 22%, Higbee, actually 22%. But if you go all the way down, you see... no,
this can't be good for Evan. This can't be good.
Evan Engram, 18.1% of his first 3 targets, and that's without Calvin Ridley. That's just competing against Kirk and Zay Jones. So add Kirk or you add Ridley to that, like he's not going to get a ton of those first read targets anymore. Maybe he'll maintain some of those design plays, but yeah, I don't see. We might have seen the peak of Evan Ingram's capabilities.
For sure.
He might be on the waiver wire.
Shaun's
by week 6.
No.
Some weeks.
Yeah, I think he might be on the waiver wire because it could be so slow for him, and then maybe he gets a bad linebacker matchup, and then he has like a 30 bomb. Like I think that sounds crazy, but I think it could be that.
I don't know, because this is my favorite tight end out of that tier.
Okay.
You liked Njoku better. Like, I just like the offense as a whole. I think it's a bigger pie. So for that reason, like, I'm not really going to draft any 3 of them. I would go Engram, Njoku, and Muth last. Like, the Steelers' offense might be like really bad, which doesn't bode well for a guy that's only on the field for about 70% of the snaps to start with. So, like, for that reason, he's gone. But the Jags' offense might, average 25 plus every week.
It's gonna be a fast-paced offense.
So
I think that's a good hit. They're gonna run at a high pace and they're gonna throw the ball a ton. So
it's just gonna be more overall opportunities. So
I think this is interesting too. Like Engram he did play a little bit below his expected fantasy points just based on usage last year and all statistics. He had an expected fantasy points per game of 10.3. Now he only finished with around 8 last year, so there was some room there. Yeah, I mean, really, really good. But but that's what we're saying that he could have been the peak of his usage.
Play him in
especially if Calvin is Calvin again.
Play him in DFS, draft him in best ball. I just wouldn't be banking on. I just wouldn't want to go into the season as Evan Engram as somebody that like. I'd rather take the bigger upswing with a guy like Dulcich. Right? He could be the number 2
for sure.
Offense. Dulcich could be the number 1 if Judy stinks, right? Which some people think Judy stinks. So it's like, I know that's hopium, right? We're just getting high off of it, but I think like that upside case is too tasty, 2 to 9. So
yeah, I think the lesson of like the tight end position that like we're gonna continue pounding is like go for upside, take a swing. Yeah. It's like go for a guy where you see carving out a large role and being like hyper efficient in their surroundings versus the safe guy that's gonna average 7 points a week. It's like that's not doing you anything. Like, you might make the play. Like, you want swings. You want huge weeks. Like, you want guys that are going to make an impact on your roster. And there's guys sprinkled in there. It's like there's going to be guys in the double-digit tight end range that finish around, 5, 6. It's like that's all about finding them.
I had Kyle Pitts on 2 teams. Both of them went to the semis. I actually won a ship with Kyle Pitts as a 3rd-round draft pick. I dropped him, and I was just streaming tight ends, and it was fine. Like, that's just how the position is. Take the swing. Yep. Go for it. Like, it will result in higher upside. But that'll do it for tight ends. That was a quick and tidy episode. It was a funner conversation than I thought. Right? It was a good one. Before we get out of here, Keegan, what's on your mind? What do you have to tell the audience?
Man, I love some good barbecue. I'm ready. I'm ready for a nap.
Good for you.
That's all I got.
Barbecue.
You earned it.
I did. Yeah, it's Friday. Go treat yourself. You know,
yourself
on
to
Fridays. Yeah, treat yourself to a little nap on work afternoons on Fridays. Maybe get a little barbecue.
The people listening to this
learn
on
how to love
Monday-
life.
People listening on this Monday are like, fuck this dude. He's talking about his Friday.
Look at this asshole.
Until next time, everybody.